finals! Welcome back, NUIC football fanatics. We're heading to the state finals where our Forreston Cardinals are going to be set to take on the Decatur St. Teresa Bulldogs. Can't believe it's already been 14 weeks, Shane. We kind of had this game picked out back in week 4 when these two teams were ranked number 1 and 2, and now the game's kind of come to fruition as we get set to see undefeated Forreston at 13-0 and a 12-1 St. Teresa Bulldog team.
Yeah, we really did spend quite a few weeks talking Decatur St. Teresa, number 1 team. You know, the whole multiplier issue, why are they playing here? Those things are starting to resurface again. Forreston's been there since the beginning of the year, like we thought they would be. You know, there's really a lot of things to talk about. Such a young Forreston team. You know, this is something we could be talking about again next year, other than Decatur St. Teresa obviously won't be in 1A. But a lot has transpired. A lot of interesting games in the playoffs, whatnot, matchups, and finally, where it all counts.
Yeah, Champaign, and here we are with an NUIC team going to the state finals for the 13th time in the past 14 seasons.
What a run.
And the more interesting thing that I like about that is the NUIC is 11-2 in those previous 13 trips. Stockton being the only one not to bring it home. So, with that said, let's take a look at the matchup altogether. Forreston got here by way of a 35-7 victory over Ottawa Marquette last week, and Decatur St. Teresa got here by way of a 34-20 win over Hardin Calhoun. Now, as close as St. Teresa's score was with a 2-score victory, they did jump out to a 21-0 lead early on in the game, took a 21-7 lead into halftime. Forreston, on the other hand, jumped out to a 28-0 lead that they took into halftime, added onto it in the fourth quarter, and then just kind of really coasted. I mean, really, Forreston up 28-0 halftime, they basically shut the engines off just as fast as they turned them on getting into Ottawa Saturday.
Right. You know, it's one of those situations where you're up 28-0, halftime, cold day. Realistically, your best friend is just seeing, you know, 3 zeros on the scoreboard at the end of the fourth quarter. You went there, you stayed focused, you handled your business, and you waited basically for time to run out because that game was never in jeopardy of Ottawa Marquette coming back or anything. So realistically, you did what you were supposed to, and you couldn't get out of there fast enough with a win.
Yeah, and I mean, some people were questioning, you know, wow, what happened? You know, Forreston was up 28-0, they only won 35-7. What happened there? Well, I tell you what happened. Did it put brakes on? Got more kids playing time. In my opinion, that's how you build your program moving forward, is to get them younger kids that playing time. Granted, the starters still were in the game at different times, but he was getting more kids into the game, and like you said, just basically running the clock down to move on to the next round, get to Champaign, and get to Champaign relatively healthy.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that point up because, you know, success breeds itself, I believe in. So 2 years ago, when Forreston won the state championship, their freshmen and sophomores are now this year's varsity team, and seeing that and being a part of that whole experience, you know, it kind of has a lingering effect, so to speak. If that's what you see, it's very easy for that to transpire more easily. It's more comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
It's you're gonna have a lot of kids down there when you get on the turf. We've been here before. Business as usual. You're not going to have a lot of, I mean, you'll always have your jitters. It's the state championship game, but as far as being nervous about the game itself, it's just another game.
And I agree. I mean, all you gotta do is go back. Okay, look at 1997, Galena. 1999, Galena there
Right.
again. 2003, Galena. Okay, fast forward 2 more years. Dakota '05, Dakota '07, Dakota '11. Dakota was ranked #1 in '09 even.
Right.
Okay, then you get Lena. Lena in 10, Lena in 13, and Lena Winslow had very good chances the 2 years prior to that, or the last 2 years as well,
Right.
as heavy favorites. And now it's like it's Forreston's turn, okay? 14, 15. And Forreston has taken a good page from playing against the Dakotas and the Lena Winslows, and even the 1 year for EPC 2 years ago where they got steamrolled by him. But then again, everybody got steamrolled by EPC 2 years ago. But it's just the nature of our conference. I mean, you can throw Aquin in '05, Galena again in '07,
Right.
and then you got Stockton there in '04 and '12. I mean, it's just been a really good balance of teams. Ironically, all these teams were original members of the NWIC part of the conference outside of Forreston.
Right, and not to mention all the years that the teams had those said championships. Think of all the years where these teams were still very good, but got beat by the eventual state champion, only to come from the NUIC.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look back at
A lot of countless years where teams were good that didn't make it because
2 years ago you had Galena, which could have been Lena Winslow that year as well. I had actually mentioned that with a guy earlier today that had Lena Winslow actually won that game 2 years ago. I think they could have got by Forreston in that rematch game because I thought and felt that that team was very well put together and able to compete with Forreston as their first game that year. Or, well, actually it was their only game that year because they didn't meet up in the playoffs then. But Forreston had won that game by only a touchdown in what was a very physical, hard-fought game. Go back to '99 again. You got 3 teams there: Milledgeville, Dakota, and Galena, all in the semifinals.
Back when the playoffs were seeded properly.
Right, 1 through 32, which is definitely, I'm a big advocate of that.
Gives you a true champion.
It does. And if you look at the 5 years that the IHSA had the 1 through 32 seeding, your state championship games were a lot closer. You didn't see you still saw some blowouts,
right,
but nowhere near at the rate they have been here recently.
Right. Even more so once you had the quadrant system where you were eliminating state contenders within the first 2 rounds.
Oh yes, the quadrant. I mean, if they're gonna do it in a way that splits the state in half, which I can understand because that's the way it originally was. It's the way they went back to. They did the 5-year trial on the 1 through 32. Me personally, I played in that system. I love that system. I know a lot of people that follow us that love that system. But others are more on board with the 1 through 16, or in other cases, some people do like the quadrants because it at least guarantees an area team to be in the semifinals every year.
And getting back to that, although this year wouldn't have been a problem because this Forreston team is just something special.
Oh yeah, you look at the northern bracket, and you could look from 1 through 16 and say, hey, right there,
Forreston.
I mean, let's be honest, okay? Before the start of the playoffs, I picked 6 teams that I felt could make the state championship. 3 in the north and 3 in the south. And lo and behold, 2 of them teams are playing for the state championship.
Right.
And in the north, I had Lena Winslow, Bureau Valley, and Forreston. Because I just wasn't sure how that Bureau Valley-Lena Winslow game was going to pan out.
Right.
And in the south, I had Tuscola, St. Teresa, and Athens, which Tuscola got knocked off by Calhoun, which St. Teresa just took care of, and St. Teresa took care of Athens themselves. But let's take a look at the matchup that we actually have in place, which is Forreston and St. Teresa, okay? Let's look at some numbers quick. Forreston on the year is averaging 39.5 points a game. They're giving up 5.2 points per game for a difference of a 5 touchdown win average. St. Teresa is scoring on average 41.8 points per game to 13.8 points per game that they're giving up for a 4-score advantage per game. Now let's transfer that into the playoffs. Okay, Shane? Forreston is outscoring their opponents 47-7.
It's a running clock average.
Still a running clock average, despite the fact that they only had a 28-point win last week. St. Teresa is outscoring their opponents 37-20. Rounding down and up. You know, really it's 37.2 and 19.8, but it's still really it's 17 points. So they're winning by 3 scores, but it's really 2 touchdowns and a field goal score. There's a lot of things that is really going to be interesting in this game, and of course, numbers are great to look at because you can look at, okay, that's a 4-game difference. But here's some interesting things too. Both these teams come in as the number 2 seed, so both of them had to face the number 15 seed in the first round. Now take a look at their past. Forreston played 15 seed. Then they matched up with the next highest seed that they could possibly match up with, which was Stark County, the number 7 seed. Then they draw Lena Winslow, the number 6 seed. And then they get Ottawa Marquette, the number 1 seed. St. Teresa, on the other hand, went number 15 with Toledo Cumberland. Then they went number 10 with Athens, which I honestly feel that Athens was much better than a number 10 seed to begin with anyhow. And that game played out to that
1 point.
Yeah, 1-point game. But then they draw number 14, Warrensburg Latham, a conference opponent. And then they get number 12, Hardin Calhoun. Now, I'm not taking any discredit away from Calhoun upsetting Tuscola or Warrensburg Latham, because obviously there are some things with Warrensburg Latham where they were a little bit more athletically advanced than some of the teams that they played. They just had a worse record that got them the lower seed. And I get that. But I do look at these scores. I look at the teams that they've played. And I look at Forreston scores and the teams that they've played. And to be honest, a couple of the teams Forreston has played, I'd put up against the teams that St. Teresa has played. And I would take the teams that Forreston beat over those teams that St. Teresa beat.
Well, no doubt. Forreston, while not having any struggles with either of these teams, had a quote-unquote harder path to get to where they are now. Like you said, Toledo Cumberland, Calhoun. The one that really sticks out in my mind is that Athens matchup. The previous teams I listed, other than Athens, aren't what you'd consider top-of-the-line teams, but the fact that they played some close games with those lower opponents has to be concerning if you're someone looking at this from the outside. Now, you could also look at that Athens matchup, and because there was people that picked Athens to be the South representative at state championship game.
Oh, definitely.
So St. Teresa is capable of playing a very good opponent and beating a very good opponent. That's not in question here. What's in question here is how they're going to match up against a Forreston team that has really steamrolled everybody to this point.
Yes. And to answer that question, I mean, look at a few things as far as that matchup is concerned. On the line, they seem to really match up well. I mean, I would say both lines average about the same, right around the 225-pound range. As far as speed, I haven't really seen the speed of the line of St. Teresa, but we both know the speed of the line of Forreston. Now, the linemen for St. Teresa look to be pretty athletic for that 225, 230-pound size frame, just as Forreston is. But it's how fast are they going to come off the ball? Whoever comes off the ball the fastest in my opinion, is going to win the line of scrimmage, which is usually the case anyway, unless
Right.
you're just beating them off the ball, but you weigh 40 pounds less and really just get manhandled by somebody who
Is
bigger than you. That's not going to be the case here, obviously, because really, you can go all 5 guys, and they're really going to stack up. Now, where I see St. Teresa having a little bit of an advantage is with their halfback. We've mentioned them before on video. We've mentioned them throughout the year, and that's Jacardia Wright. Okay, he is a Division I recruited athlete as a sophomore in high school.
All-state running back as well.
He was all-state running back, and last year as a I shouldn't say true freshman because you can only be a true freshman in college, but as a freshman last year, he was an All-American safety by Max Preps, which is a national thing.
A national.
So, obviously, that's what got him on the 4-star recruit list to start the beginning of the year. And honestly, rightfully so. I mean, I've seen some video of him,
He's very good.
and he's very quick. He covers a lot of ground in the hurry. I mean, really, you can put him dead center of the field, and he can get from sideline or over to the other sideline just like that to cover a pass. Now, that's going to work in favor of Forreston because Forreston throws maybe 4 times a ball game. However, they do have other guys that are going to be pretty speedy. Their cornerbacks are pretty fast. Their linebackers are pretty quick. But I feel that Forreston's speed as a team is going to match up well with St. Teresa.
I would agree with that. And just to not necessarily backtrack, but we look at that final score last week also. Forreston faced something that they really hadn't seen much of this year to this point. Obviously, teams stacked the box against Forreston. That's no joke or anything new.
Yeah, they're used to facing that.
But when Ottawa Marquette came out with a 6-man front, it didn't stop Forreston, but it slowed them down a little bit. I think that is something that we could see in this game from St. Teresa that might limit some of Forreston's ability with the speed game. Is it going to be enough? I don't know.
That's pretty good because, if they do stack the box, I feel that they have the athleticism to contain Forreston. Now, what you've seen in the stats that we listed is St. Teresa is basically giving up 3 touchdowns a game in the playoffs. And these are in close games.
And to lesser opponents than what a Forreston team is going to be. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to shut Forreston down. Forreston's going to get their points. It's just whether or not they give up the points.
Right. And I will agree with you there. Here's the thing that I do know, because I've done a little bit of homework over the weekend and most of today as well. St. Teresa is pretty solid through the defensive tackles. Their defensive tackles are going to be athletic. They're going to match up great with the size for Forreston. They generally run about what looks to be a 4-4 type defense or a 5-3, which is nothing that Forreston hasn't seen. What Forreston's going to need to do, as is the case in most of the defenses that they play against, is they're going to have to get the trap game to work so that they can get the ball moving up the middle on the backside traps. And then I think what you'll see, as long as they can get the trap game working, and I think you'll see them have good success to the outside, because as long as they can get their down blocks in, you're going to have that open area going off tackle. In which, from what I have seen, St. Teresa's athletic, but their tackling is not fundamentally sound like Forreston is used to seeing playing in the NUIC.
Right, and that's there again. That's a north versus south. You look at all the teams that have played over the years, and they always come back saying, "Well, you've hit harder than anybody we've played to this point." So, as far as the physicality of the game, I don't know that they're going to necessarily match up with Forreston.
Talking to a Tuscola guy earlier today, who his team played against St. Teresa. He
put a whooping on St. Teresa.
Yeah. He personally watched some game film on Forreston in hopes that Tuscola was going to make the state championship. And what he said was pretty simple. Forreston is going to be something that St. Teresa has not seen. He was even worried about Tuscola matching up with Forreston. So, I mean, that really says a lot. But there again, where Tuscola or where St. Teresa is going to have success is in their spread offense. Because what they're going to do is they're going to have two wide receivers that are split out wide. Then they're going to have a slot receiver. They'll have a tight end. And then they'll have the halfback, Jacardi or right, in a single backfield. And what they're trying to do, obviously, is spread Forreston out, or any defense that they play anyway, because this is their normal offense. But they're going to get
a lot more.
Get a lot more running lanes up the middle. Now here's the thing though, is they really want to run Jacardi up the middle, because obviously the quicker you can get up the middle, the quicker you can surprise the defense and the faster you can get to the end zone. What Forreston will have to do to combat that is they're definitely going to need to attack the halfback. They cannot wait for him to dance and pick his holes, because the minute he picks his holes, he's going to be gone. So when he's sitting there doing his little thing, trying to visualize where the hole's going to be, is where they need to attack him, because he's not running at full speed yet. If they sit back and wait for him, he's going to run right by them, because he's going to have that advantage already. Because he knows where they're going, where they don't. So what they just need to be aggressive and not over pursuit. They need to stay home.
Right, and I would agree with that. It's just something that we've also seen over years past with Tuscola playing out of the spread offense. To me, Forreston's defense, the key there, it's not going to be the fact that I'm worried about them shutting down. It's more or less in St. Teresa's first and second drives. Let's be honest, the spread offense outside of Aquin is something that we don't see up here a lot, and it can take a team a few series to get adjusted to. We saw that in 2010 with Lena Winslow, and we saw it in 2011 with Dakota, and the state championship game is against Tuscola. That jet sweep is something that can open up a lot of things, but as we saw in those years, it didn't take long for the defenses to get adjusted, and it seems like once you stop the run out of that spread offense, you can really key in on shutting down the passing game as well, and realistically these spread offenses have a way of crumbling.
They do, especially when you're playing in Champaign on a 35-degree day
in a stadium with winds you haven't really experienced.
Right, because let's face it, the way Memorial Stadium is built, it's basically built to create a wind tunnel.
Right.
Not really, but it does, because
Yep.
you have the north end is wide open with very low seat. Well, you got a little bit of seating there, but the south end has lesser seating,
right.
and it's also wide open. And let's face it, we got 16-mile-an-hour winds that they're forecasting as of right now.
It'll feel like 30 down on the field.
So it's going to feel like 30 degrees on the field. It may even feel less than that because the game's at 10 o'clock in the morning, so your morning time temperature is probably going to be about 35 degrees to begin with anyway. Especially since the low for the night before is like 28 degrees. The wind is going to be coming out of the north-northwest. So there will be some winds shuffling through the stadium.
Bodes well for a more running dominant
It
offense
does
like
bode well
Forreston.
for a run-dominated offense, which both teams really are. You mentioned on the jet sweep. I mean, here's the thing. They're going to have another guy, Zach Jarrett, who is a wide receiver, who's very quick, and he's going to get the ball on that jet sweep. He's number 21. If you guys are watching the game, pay attention to him. And Jacardia Wright's number 9, so you can pay attention to him too. Jacardia is going to go out on the lead block on this. So as soon as you see number 21 come in motion, you know exactly what's going to happen. Now here's the thing that St. Teresa likes to do too. They like to be unbalanced, where they move the other tackle to the other side. That's an area where Forreston is going to need to recognize what's going on so that they can shift their defense appropriately. Because if they stay unbalanced to an unbalanced line, that's just going to create more running room for these guys. Now, St. Teresa is not going to throw the ball down the field. They don't throw the ball down the field. What they will do, throwing the ball in that spread offense, is similar to what Aquin does or Stockton does on a routine manner. However, Forreston doesn't face those two schools. But what it is, it's going to be a little quick screen pass or a little bubble to the flats.
It's a glorified run play in the form of a pass.
Right. That's exactly it. Now, where Forreston does have a little bit of experience is this isn't their first go-around with the spread offense. They've seen the spread against EPC. They've seen the spread against Stark County, which Stark County is always running out of the spread.
Right.
And they run the ball and they throw the ball. So I think Forreston will be all right. The thing that's going to be that shock factor for them is going to be the speed. Now, I'm not saying that their speed is going to be something that's going to overwhelm Forreston. It may be at first because, let's face it, Jacardia Wright is probably... I really feel that he's like a Ravion Valentine for Lena Winslow. He's probably 6 inches taller, maybe 5 inches taller, and probably 10 to 15 pounds heavier. But as far as their style of running, it's very similar. They're both scat back type of backs. They're just looking for that hole and a cut back and gone.
A finesse runner, so to speak, that's not really wanting to get hit very hard.
Right. And that's basically what I see when I watch Jacardia run. And that's where Forreston really needs to attack the running back. Now, another thing that they're going to need to do is make sure that they push everything inside. So their defensive ends are going to have to gain that 2-yard penetration off the line. And that will help shut down that jet sweep that I feel is really going to be more effective and more crucial for the success of St. Teresa in this matchup. And Forreston is just going to have to stick to assignments. They're going to need to stay home, do not over-pursue,
right,
and just wrap up cleanly. And by God, all means, hit low. Do not try to take them out. If you try to take them out up high, the kid's strong enough, he's going to run through you. If you take him out, you know, take out the legs, he's going to fall down.
And I agree with all that. And Another aspect of Forreston's game that we haven't touched on, but we've talked about a lot ourselves, is the mental aspect. Um, Teams can get away with mental errors, but at this level of state championships, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, so to speak, something that Forreston has had issues with this year. 10 out of their 13 games, they have had more penalties than their opponents, and they're 13-0. Now that speaks volumes of when the penalties occur. It could be garbage time, or it could just be that Forreston is that good of a team to overcome their mental mistakes. Like last week, they had 4 personal fouls. You play a higher quality opponent in a state championship game. Definitely something that is concerning, I would think, for Forreston. And obviously it'll be addressed this week. That doesn't need to be mentioned, but something to keep your eye on. Just almost like a relax, so to speak.
Oh, and you said it. I mean, 4 personal fouls. That's 60 yards. That was given up for free.
Right.
Now, out of those 4 personal fouls, I would say 3 of them were actual legit. The 4th one, which was actually the first one, was borderline, but it was still throwing. So, I mean, that means you have to be
a
little bit more conservative and self-aware of where you're at and what's taking place in front of you. And that's when the defensive end hit the quarterback on a pass play.
As he was throwing.
Yep. And that's really a hard one to lay up on, especially if you're in that momentum of the play. But if you have a step or more before you hit the kid, you better not hit the kid.
Right.
And that's where their other 2 hits came along with. Because they happened both on the Forreston sideline as the running back was, or quarterback, whoever. One was the running back, the other was the quarterback. They both ran out of bounds.
Quite a ways.
And the one kid, literally, I was looking right down the line when it happened. And the one kid for Marquette had his foot on the sideline, out of bounds.
Which is a good 3 feet.
And, yeah, and the linebacker drilled him through the Forreston players. It's like, come on, man, you can't be stupid like that. Seriously, you got to know when you can lay up. I mean, play smart. You got to stay within yourself. Play within the moment. You got to have that energy. But by God, know where you're at on the field.
Right.
You have to, in order to negate the stupid penalties. So you bring up a very good point, because in a game like this, you cannot afford that. And it kind of shows the youth that Forreston really is, too. So Shane, I mean, that really breaks down much of the game. What we can expect to really see out of St. Teresa, and what Forreston needs to do really to have control of the ball game.
Right. We broke down a lot of things, and ultimately my biggest thing for Forreston's success is just be who you are. Don't get wrapped up in the moment, so to speak. Stay true to what you've done to get to this point. Those 3 things, I really think if Forreston does that, they'll be all right.
And I agree with you, because as long as Forreston comes in to this game, like you said, sticking to what they've done to get here on the year. Take in the moment, but don't get consumed by the moment. And play your game. They'll be fine. And I mean, I really like Forreston in this game. I think this is going to be a great football game. I honestly feel it'll be one of the best football games of the entire state championship weekend. And I can't wait for us to get down to Champaign Thursday night. Granted, we won't get there till late, but we'll be there Thursday night. And get to the field Friday morning and just take it all in ourselves even.
Right. There's something special about Thanksgiving weekend, I feel.
It never gets old.
No. Something about eating turkey, spending time with family, and then that night you head down to Champaign to watch a state championship game. We've been fortunate enough to do that a few times.
Yes, we have.
Even more fortunate to be able to cover a state championship game the first year that we've done this. So,
which is awesome.
Which we're very thankful for. Hopefully it doesn't spoil us, but looking at how young of a Forreston team is and all the talent that we have in the conference coming back next year, you never know. This might be an annual thing for us.
Annual could be as in next year. Yes, I could definitely see that. As I feel we will definitely have 2 teams next year that will definitely be state title contenders. But as long as we keep producing the conference teams that we have, I mean, all you got to do is look since 1997 where we have 12 state championships out of our conference.
But, we lost one of those teams because
that's not including that team.
Oh, yeah.
Because South Beloit wasn't in that conference then.
No, they weren't. We just kind of included them when they were in the NUIC, and I'm really disappointed in missing out on all their potentials upcoming state championships that they weren't going to have. So
sorry, South Beloit, we love you, but
anyway,
God, you had to throw me off there.
I did,
but in other words, yeah, I mean, the success over the last 21 seasons for the NUIC since the merger of the NWIC and the Upstate Illini Conference came together, we've put together one hell of a 2-decade run here, and it go back the last 14 seasons, and it just has gotten even stronger yet. So I feel really good about our conference. We've definitely created a product as far as the conference in general for the style of football that we play up here.
Right. And I would agree that realistically looking at it, Galena, all the great teams of the past have really put us in a position to be where we're at. But talking the last 14 years, Akron, Dakota, even further back a little bit than that, Stockton, Galena, those Galena teams that you talked about, really started paving the way for this to happen. You get one person through the wall and the wall crumbles, so to speak. That's just something that we've seen and could continue to do so.
It's a great thing, like we stated earlier. Okay, you had the great, and I mean absolutely great Galena teams of the late 90s, and everybody was chasing them. And then it was Dakota. I mean, Stockton had that great year in between there. But then it was Dakota, and Dakota just took off. I mean, you look at what they did from 2005 to 2011. They were 75 and 10. With 3 titles.
And could have been more.
And even in that time period, Lena Winslow was right there, nipping on Dakota's heels, and even got their first title in that time period as well.
Right. I mean, that could be us sitting here talking about Lena Winslow if it wasn't for Dakota.
Right.
But it goes back to all our conversations earlier that you look at the bracket, and when the quadrants were in place, you had a state championship team losing in the second round.
I mean, and that's one of the great things, too, is because you look inside that Dakota run as well, you got Akron winning state. You have Galena winning their 3rd title. And then you have Lena winning a title before Dakota pulls their 3rd title. And then you got Forreston and EPC jumping on board and Stockton getting back to the big show. I mean, it's been awesome. And to even look back to 2010 when Lena was at state, so that's the last 7 seasons, we've had a team there every year but last year. So that's just amazing.
Incredible.
And it this conference is just awesome. I love our conference. I always have. God,
makes our job easier.
It does.
Covering good ball.
And I mean, this is the reason why we started this whole production process in the first place. Was because this conference deserves this kind of coverage that went away long ago. Yeah, I mean, it's just. This has been absolutely fun, and I'm just glad, like you said, we have another conference team at state in our first year of doing this, and we get to go down there and enjoy the experience ourselves, even though it's not our school, but it is our school, right? So,
very well said.
We'll see you in Champaign on Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Forreston taking on the St. Teresa Bulldogs. And Forreston, come ready to play. Be ready, be focused, stick to the game plan, and go Cardinals. And always root for the NUIC.